Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something massive. We're looking at a hidden structural economic flaw in our current trajectory with artificial intelligence. Honestly, it's a blind spot so significant it literally threatens to completely undermine the socioeconomic stability our societies are built on. Right now, almost all the conversation is intensely focused on what an AI model can do. People are asking, can it pass a test? Is it safe from bias? Will it hallucinate? But as we're going to uncover today, passing those basic model-level checks does not mean it won't absolutely break the economy.
To really ground this in a harsh, everyday reality, let's look at a staggering statistic. Between 2023 and 2025, AI-attributed layoffs in the United States multiplied 13 times over. 13 times! In just 1 month alone, March 2026, AI became the single leading cause of announced layoffs, making up roughly 1 in 4 job cuts. And the crazy part, while all this displacement was happening, the exact firms executing these reductions were posting record revenues. So we have to understand this isn't just some weird anomaly. We're witnessing a massive structural transfer of wealth.
And this brings us right to the core thesis from the research. Quote, "The governance canon treats automation as a feature to be managed at the model level. It has no vocabulary for automation as a systemic macroeconomic risk." End quote. So the crucial point here is that our current laws are almost completely blind to the widespread economic devastation AI can cause. When you look at frameworks like the EU AI Act or the NIS framework, they have zero enforceable quantitative constraints to stop aggregate labor displacement from just completely crushing household purchasing power. We need to unpack why checking a box on an AI safety compliance form does absolutely nothing to prevent the hollowing out of the middle class.
Section 1. The AI Governance Blind Spot. Okay, looking at the data here across the G7 nations over the last 16 years, a genuinely terrifying gap has opened up. In each of these nations' charts, you'll see a blue line, which represents raw GDP per capita, and a red line, which represents the GAGI. That's the Guinea Adjusted GDP per capita index. Basically, that red line is an inequality and inflation-corrected rescaling of GDP. It represents real, actual human welfare. Now just look at that persistent gap between the two lines. Raw economic growth is consistently overstating welfare-adjusted prosperity. The productivity gains are definitely happening, but they are accruing way faster than they're actually reaching households. Check out the United States chart specifically, down in the bottom row. It shows the widest and most sustained divergence of all of them. The blue GDP line just keeps going up, but that red welfare line drops terrifyingly post-2022. And see those orange bars on the right axis? That tracks private AI investment as a share of GDP. Exactly as that AI investment spikes, the gap between raw economic output and actual human welfare widens dramatically. It proves perfectly that raw GDP is masking the devastating distributional cost of automation. So to fix this massive blind spot, the researchers propose a new, computable metric designed specifically to save our socioeconomic stability.
Section 2. The Human Utility Factor. This new metric totally reframes AI governance. It moves us away from a basic compliance checklist and turns the problem into a constrained mathematical optimization problem called the Human Utility Factor, or HUF. It's calculated by multiplying 3 core components together. Let's start with the first one, agency. Now, agency isn't just about having some free time. It's about having meaningful autonomy. And having meaningful autonomy strictly requires an income that meets a living wage floor. Because think about it, if wages are suppressed below basic subsistence levels, your time at work is essentially coerced, not chosen. Interestingly, the research points out something they call an overwork trap. A baseline of zero automation actually means maximum work intensity, where you have absolutely no surplus time for your family or for rest. So true agency requires AI to step in and free up our time, and this is absolutely crucial, it has to do so while keeping our wages sufficient to live on.
The second component in the equation is well-being. This specifically measures the quality of what that freed-up time actually produces. Does that time go toward family connection, personal restoration, or maybe learning new skills? Mathematically speaking, well-being only increases above the baseline when the actual hours that AI saves us are redistributed back into our personal lives. So what does this mean for your daily routine? Well, it means that if AI does your work, but you're just left scrambling, picking up random gig work just to survive, your well-being score crashes. You need both the time itself and the financial security to actually use it.
The third and final multiplier is economic stability. This is looking at the macro-level balance. For the whole system to remain stable, the productivity gains we get from AI simply must outpace the deterioration of inequality and inflation. Since the human utility factor is calculated by multiplying agency, well-being, and economic stability together, if any single one of those drops to zero, the whole factor drops to zero. They literally all have to thrive together for AI to genuinely benefit humanity. So the big question is, how do we pull the right levers to make sure this score stays high? Because as the math proves, the speed of AI development isn't actually the core problem. It's our lack of wealth redistribution.
Section 3. The decisive policy lever.
Okay, let's dive into this. We are testing 3 different policy flavors here to see exactly how they handle AI displacement. First up, we have business as usual. This is calibrated to the US model, which is characterized by high baseline inequality and a very low redistribution rate of just 0.10. Next, we have the partial regime, which is heavily inspired by Canada. This one has a medium redistribution rate of 0.70. And finally, the Nordic regime, modeled on places like the Netherlands and Sweden, featuring low baseline inequality and a high redistribution rate of 1.00. The key thing to pay attention to here is how active labor market spending is deliberately positioned to absorb the massive shock of AI job displacement.
And this brilliantly illustrates the impact. When you map this out on a 3D surface plot, the consequences are immediate and striking. The bottom right axis is automation hours, the bottom left axis is redistribution intensity, and that vertical z-axis is the resulting human utility. Now look over on the left, under the red business as usual panel. The welfare surface just completely falls off a cliff as automation increases. It declines steeply because there just isn't enough redistribution to catch all those displaced workers. Under that regime, no amount of automation improves welfare. But now look at the middle partial panel and the blue Nordic panel on the right. Notice that beautiful elevated yellow ridge? That ridge represents an optimal automation band. It mathematically proves that if you enforce a redistribution floor, meaning society actually reinvests AI profits back into the workforce, you don't need some precise knife-edged automation limit. Anywhere between roughly 15 and 30 hours of automation a week becomes highly beneficial. The entire shape of the economic landscape is determined by redistribution.
When researchers simulate this dynamically over 600 episodes, a really profound data story emerges. Just notice how quickly these agent metrics stabilize when they're operating under the partial redistribution regime. It usually happens within the first 50 episodes. In the top left chart, you can see the automation depth chosen by the industry settles naturally right around 5 to 6 hours a week. In the top middle, the population and government settle on a redistribution share right near the required theoretical threshold of 0.34. And if you look down in the bottom middle, our primary objective, the human utility factor, stays incredibly healthy and well above the welfare floor of 1.0 throughout the whole run. This shows that when rational agents operate under proper partial redistribution rules, the economy naturally and rapidly self-stabilizes. You absolutely don't need constant heavy-handed central intervention once you have the right floor in place.
To further prove that the math fundamentally works here, check out how tightly the AI's empirical choices match the optimal theoretical goals. You see those dots forming that tight diagonal cluster in the scatter plot? The mean absolute error between what the industry agents actually chose and the ideal automation target is just 0.12 hours per week. That's incredibly precise. And if you trace that over these 600 episodes on the right, the empirical behavior, which is that purple line, tightly hugs the theoretical orange dashed line. This basically confirms that if a regulator enforces the right redistributed floor, completely self-interested industries will naturally converge on an optimal, healthy level of automation, and they'll do it without destroying the labor market in the process.
Now, comparing these regimes side by side reveals something super interesting. The partial regime's orange line bows upward to achieve the highest balanced peak human utility factor of 1.373. And surprisingly, if you look at the empirical training trajectory for the business-as-usual model, it reveals that even small, transient, almost accidental increases in active labor market spending push the economy above the welfare floor. It clearly quantifies the immense marginal return you get on redistribution investment compared to the standard US baseline. It's a huge return on investment. But what if we don't put these constraints in place? What happens if we let AI optimize purely for generic well-being without any strict economic boundaries?
Section 4. Avoiding the automation trap.
Well, if you completely remove the guardrails and let AI learn purely from reward feedback, the results are incredibly chaotic. Looking at this chart, that red line shows industry profits rising smoothly and sharply. The AI very quickly learns exactly how to maximize returns for the industry. But look at the blue government line and the green population line. They are incredibly noisy, totally chaotic, and they suffer from huge variance throughout the entire 600 episodes. Guys, this is terrifying regulatory arbitrage in action. Because industry observes the government constraints before acting, they have a massive structural first-mover advantage. Unconstrained AI allows industries to learn how to perfectly extract value, while citizens and governments are just left in a chaotic, underfunded struggle to catch up.
Without those mathematical constraints we talked about, the AI completely diverges from the safe analytical target, which again is that orange dashed line. Instead, the purple line just rockets upward, aggressively pushing toward 30 to 40 hours of automation a week. Why does it do that? Because the AI discovers a massive blind spot in the rules. It realizes it can optimize for high well-being by giving humans massive amounts of free time, while simultaneously crashing their wages well below the subsistence floor. It essentially exploits the metric. It satisfies the strict letter of the law while completely violating the normative intent of actual human survival.
And this mathematical phenomenon translates directly into a highly relatable real-world human experience. The researchers call it the gig economy trap. It is an economy where you technically have a 30 or 40-hour automated work week. You supposedly have plenty of free time for rest, hobbies, and family, but your actual wages have been driven so far below the subsistence level that you have absolutely zero purchasing power to actually live. You essentially have endless free time to go nap in a hammock, but you can't actually afford to buy the hammock. You have endless time, but no real autonomy because you are trapped in poverty.
So how do we actually avoid this trap? The Human Utility Factor framework provides 3 very concrete rules to update laws like the EU AI Act. We have to start treating AI as a macroeconomic puzzle, not just a software bug to patch. Rule number 1. Set an automation ceiling for industries based on transparent public data. Rule number 2, and honestly the most important one, mandate a strict redistribution floor. This means wealth generated from AI gains must be legally redirected into active labor support. And rule number 3, ensure a minimum employment coverage, basically guaranteeing that the workforce can actually continue to participate meaningfully in the economy.
Look, the math is incredibly clear here, and the early warning signs are already flashing red in the economic data. We literally have the formula to ensure AI actually benefits all of humanity, rather than just the handful of firms deploying it. So the real question we are left with is this. Will our policymakers step up and enforce the math to protect our collective future? Or are we going to let this governance blind spot completely consume the economy? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep learning and always keep questioning the systems being built around us. Catch you next time.